Hey there, welcome to Mark in the Park, the podcast. I'm your host, Mark Milow, speaker, storyteller, and healthcare advocate. And this is the place for personal reflections, stories about mindset, hobbies, and purpose. And a reminder that life doesn't stop at a diagnosis. In fact, often the real journey begins after. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mark at the Park podcast. Today, you've got me. So, in my podcast, I've been talking about Parkinson's and my diagnosis with it, and even in the very show notes and definitions of this program, it's talking about life with Parkinson's, but not all about Parkinson's. But I felt it was appropriate to have an episode like this where we talk about what Parkinson's is and what it's not, actually. So I entitled this episode, What is Parkinson's? Or Why Your Doctor's Herbal Remedies Will Not Cure My Condition. And I'll explain that a little more in a minute. So guys, Parkinson's disease is, let's start with what it's not, okay? What it's not, Parkinson's disease is not a tremor. People oftentimes correlate tremors with Parkinson's because tremors are a big part of Parkinson's. A lot of people with Parkinson's have tremors, but did you know there are lots and lots of people out there that have Parkinson's that have no tremor whatsoever? Okay, so Parkinson's is not a tremor. Parkinson's is it's a disease that we've known about for some time, or a condition. I should say condition. I prefer to call it a condition rather than a disease because you can't catch it. It's not like, I sneeze on somebody and they get Parkinson's. And it's not going to rub off on somebody if I hug them, right? But so this condition's been known for some time. And with that, even though we've known about it for some time, we still don't know a lot about it. Like what causes Parkinson's disease, right? We do know actually that it's more than one thing. So a lot of times we see a condition and we think, okay, that's caused by a genetic issue or it's caused by an environmental issue. Well, we know with Parkinson's, it's actually both. Okay, you've probably seen the proliferous commercials for banning paraquat if you're in the Parkinson's community. If you're not, be aware of this because the herbicide paraquat. It's an herbicide, not a pesticide. But anyways, paraquat is linked to Parkinson's. There's actual strong evidence that the paraquat does end up getting bring people into Parkinson's. Also, there's other things out there, other chemicals that they're seeing higher and higher rates of Parkinson with it. So we do know that there's some environmental issues that contribute to Parkinson's, but there's also some genetic evidence that I think it's about 15 to 20% of people with Parkinson's they feel is a genetic issue. Okay, so genetic and environmental, but when I say environmental, another cause can be like what the person has gone through, and that we kind of put that in the environmental camp. Like for myself, when I was diagnosed. One of the things that the doctor does, many doctors do, not everybody, but this is a standard practice for many, is they do a CAT scan and an MRI to rule out other things. The CAT scan and MRI do not define Parkinson's or do not diagnose the Parkinson's. It helps to rule other things out. And so I had the MRI and the CAT scan done, and I ended up having a lot of old scarring on my brain. And the neurologist was like, hey, Mark, did you have any damage to your head growing up? I was like, well, yeah, a few times. Why? And he goes, well, there's some scarring on your brain. It's old scarring. It's been there for some time. So I was just wondering. I was like, oh yeah, there was a time I was hitting the head with a baseball bat playing baseball. There's a time I was hitting the head with a baseball bat when I wasn't playing baseball. There was a time when I was hitting the head with a brick. There's times I was hitting the head with a rock, and all these different things. Finally, my doctor was like, okay, quiet. I got it. So my Parkinson's might have been brought on by the damage that I had to my brain in some of those instances. It's possible. We don't know. Okay. So we don't. We know it's caused by multiple things. but individually, we can't always say what it's caused. Like in my case, was it the damage to my brain in those instances? Maybe. Was it due to insecticide or herbicide? I don't know. I mean, I was around rural areas growing up, but I wasn't like in a farm, so who knows, right? So, so with that, is there a diagnostic test for Parkinson's? Well, not really. There are tests that can be done to help affirm a diagnosis, but not a full-on diagnosis test that says yes, this person has Parkinson's. Um, the tests that can be done. There's a DAT scan that's done, and DAT scan. It's DAT, DAT scan. That stands for dopamine transporter test. So DAT, and with a DAT scan, it actually reveals the dopamine levels in your brain, and that's the key with Parkinson's. And I'll get to that in a minute. The dopamine levels in the brain. So DAT scan can monitor those things and determine if those levels are low and help a diagnosis along. There's some other methods that are done now. There's MRI can rule out other things. There's some blood tests that can be done, genetic testing. There's also some skin biopsy tests that show some really good promise. But again, at this point, we don't say that it is a diagnostic test. It's a diagnosis tool to help with a diagnosis. Does that make sense? So there's technically no foolproof way, but one of the main ways that Parkinson's is diagnosed is the person that's suspected of having Parkinson's is given levodopa. And the drug levodopa is the only drug that helps to really produce and bolster up a person's dopamine in their body, in their brain. And the response to that dosage is oftentimes the final factor for a doctor to say, yes, this person has Parkinson's. So really, you have to take some medicine and see how you respond to it for the doctor to kind of give the final say, yes, or yes, it is, right? Okay. So, so in essence, there's no thorough absolute test for Parkinson's at this point, but there's things that help. But the diagnosis for Parkinson's is what we call a clinical diagnosis, which means it's the doctor observing the patient, observing in their presence what this person's doing, how they're behaving, is their stability, their balance, their gait, how they walk, their arm swings, things like that. And the reported symptoms the symptoms as are reported from the patient. That's what a clinical diagnosis is. But like I said, those things along with usually an MRI or CAT scan to rule other things out, and possibly a DAT scan is used to come to a final diagnosis. Okay. Now, that's Parkinson's kind of is in an overview from the standpoint of how it's diagnosed. But what is Parkinson's? Okay. I said it's not a tremor, and it's not. And I also said the title of this was what is Parkinson's, or why your doctor's herbal remedies won't cure my condition. And I'm going to get to that here in a second. So what is dopamine? Excuse me, what is dopamine? What is Parkinson's? Okay, so many people know dopamine is used in the human body. It's a chemical in the body that's excited, or when you're excited, or when you have a reward in your life, the dopamine levels boost you up. And a lot of people know that it's like the reward drug, that your body naturally boosts up and produces into woohoo, so it's a happy drug, right? And many people know dopamine for that, but dopamine is also a communication device for your brain. And I'm not going to use all the scientific terms today. I'm going to kind of talk about this in layman's terms to try and hopefully make this make sense. Because again, the focus of this episode, what is Parkinson's? Those people out there that aren't in the Parkinson's community or don't know about Parkinson's, I want this to make sense to them. So I'm going to talk about this more in layman's terms as opposed to medical terms. Okay, but I will have to use some medical terms at some time. So dopamine is also a communication device for the body. So the brain wants the body to move. So the brain sends a signal to the motor cortex and throughout the rest of the brain and the body with dopamine. Dopamine is that device, that communication device that it uses, right? Now, with Parkinson's, what happens is there's a little part of the brain, the inside center of the brain, really, that is responsible for producing a lot of the dopamine that's used in communication as it has to do with movement for somebody, okay? Because the brain's telling the body to move, right? So that those neurons in your brain produce dopamine, and that's really where the dopamine comes in to send those signals to move, okay? Now with Parkinson's, what happens is there's little proteins that get into the brain, and those little proteins will kind of nest or affix themselves to those neurons and start clustering onto them. And by doing that, the proteins prohibit those neurons from producing more dopamine. So one by one, these little neurons are hampered by those proteins to the point where not enough dopamine is being produced for a body to move effectively or to move without hitch. So when we talk about a tremor or slowness of movement, which is a condition called bradykinesia, things like that, it's because the body is not, or the brain is not producing enough dopamine for the signal to go through clearly. The brain is sending the signal. It's sending the brain is communicating, hey, we got to move, right? But the dopamine's not taking the message through clearly because there's not enough of it there. Okay, and so that's really what Parkinson's is. It is a lack of dopamine in the brain caused by these little proteins that attack a specific part of your brain. It's called the substantia nigra. But again, there won't be a test on this. But they affix themselves there and basically kill off the brain's ability to produce dopamine for movement communication. So movement becomes difficult, irregular, and problematic. Okay. Now, here's a significant point, though. By the time someone is diagnosed, generally speaking, they have already lost 60% of their ability to produce dopamine. 60%. That's why sometimes you'll see me wear a shirt that says 60% less dopamine, 100% sexy. Now, the 100% sexy has nothing to do with the dopamine in the brain. That's just me being me. But the 60% less dopamine, that's what that's about. And so that's huge, because by the time the person's diagnosed, they've lost more than half of their ability to produce dopamine, and it's already getting worse. So it's a huge deal. So that's what That's what Parkinson's is. Okay, that's the definition of Parkinson's. That's the clinical happenings, or the medical happenings when somebody has Parkinson's. Which takes me to my subtitle for today's program. Again, what is Parkinson's, and why your doctor's herbal remedies won't cure my condition? So this is a segment of the show that I call Mark My Words. And I'm just going to jump on my soapbox here for a second. If anybody comes to you and claims that they have a cure for Parkinson's, or if you see it on social media that my uncle had Parkinson's, but Uncle Ned's herbs cured it, or his home remedy did this or did that, don't buy it. Somebody posted a response to one of my posts about Parkinson's. It's a bot. The bot posted a reply saying Uncle Joe's so and so blah 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 does this, right? So I replied back to this account, though, and I said, hey, if your uncle was cured of Parkinson's, where's the documentation of this? If it happened, there would be lots of medical proof. And so when these accounts pop up or when these comments are made, I really have little patience about it. I really do. I have very little patience about that. And I just have to say, you know what? Go back under the rock that you crawled out from under. So that's today's edition of Mark My Words. Get out of here with that stuff about your herbal remedies. Just get out of here. We don't want to see it. We don't want to hear it. Get out of here. Okay. That's today's edition of Mark My Words. So So those remedies, those methods don't really get to the root cause of what causes Parkinson's. So therefore, it won't cure it. It might alleviate some symptoms or help in some ways, but it won't cure it. Okay. There currently is no cure for Parkinson's. There's a lot of research being done right now, but there's no cure for Parkinson's. And it is what they call a degenerative neurological condition. So it gets worse over the course of time. Okay. So unfortunately, when you have a Parkinson's diagnosis, at the current time, barring a miracle of God, you will continue to have Parkinson's until a cure is found. And I just like to throw that out there because, I do believe in miracles, and I believe things could happen, but I'm just saying there's no medical or physical cure for Parkinson's at this time. Okay. Now, so with that being said, Parkinson's is a lack of dopamine. So I mentioned before the drug levodopa. Now, levodopa is the only drug that we have, the only medication that we have that helps to control the symptoms. It doesn't cure Parkinson's. It just allows us to manage the symptoms to a certain extent. Levodopa is the only thing that we can take that actually boosts the dopamine in the brain and boosts that up. But unfortunately, levodopa is still the only thing that we have for that, even though it's the drug we've been using since like the 1950s or 60s. Okay. So we take levodopa, the people with Parkinson's, we often take levodopa to help us with our symptoms. But here's the thing. Levodopa itself, though it does boost the dopamine in the brain, continued use of levodopa actually has side effects, and actually very negative side effects. And so when someone's diagnosed with Parkinson's and they start taking, they have to make a conscious decision to start taking this levodopa. A lot of people, they balk at that. They balk at the idea because the side effects are so bad. If you watch somebody that has had Parkinson's for some time, and we all know like Michael J. Fox has Parkinson's and has had it for quite a while, you'll often see the swaying of the body as they're, talking or standing or just, engaging in conversation. That is what's called dyskinesia, or a dyskinetic movement, based on more than likely the drug levodopa as opposed to the Parkinson's itself. So prolonged use of levodopa, one of the major negative side effects is dyskinetic behavior, dyskinesia. That uncontrollable swaying. It could be a arm or shoulder movement, things like that. And to be quite frank and honest, the end result condition of the drug can actually be worse than the disease itself. Okay, so so the definition of Parkinson's, it's the low dopamine caused by those little neurons in the brain being inhibited by the proteins. Okay, what do we do about it? We take levodopa, but levodopa is not really good for us. Okay, levodopa is paired with another drug, levodopa carbidopa. The carbidopa helps in two ways. It helps the body synthesize the levodopa into dopamine in the brain, in the body. But it also helps with the nausea, because levodopa by itself makes people rather nauseated. So carbidopa also helps to alleviate the nausea to some extent. Okay. So Parkinson's is a condition with no cure, gets worse over the course of time, and has only one drug that manages symptoms, and it's bad for us. Okay, so to diagnose Parkinson's, what do they need to see? What does the doctor or the clinician need to see to diagnose Parkinson's? So we already talked about, kind of the diagnostic process, but in a clinical diagnosis, what do they need to see? Okay, there's three main things that they look for, but one of them is essential. There's a condition of Parkinson's called bradykinesia, and bradykinesia means slowness of movement. So for a clinician to diagnose Parkinson's, they have to see bradykinesia, and then they look for two other things. They look for a resting tremor and rigidity. They might also look for something called postural instability. In other words, like how stable you are when you stand and how easy it is to tip you over, stuff like that. But bradykinesia is the number one thing that they look for. They will not diagnose somebody without bradykinesia, but you can be diagnosed with Parkinson's without a tremor or without rigidity, but you cannot be diagnosed with Parkinson's without bradykinesia. Okay, does that make sense? So bradykinesia is slowness of movement. Now, how does bradykinesia manifest itself? Well, again, it's called slowness of movement for a reason, and so for many people, one way that it impacted us is like our arms stop swinging when we walk. And the weird thing about that is most of us, as we talk about our diagnosis stories, a lot of us had it brought to our attention from somebody else. We didn't notice it ourselves because the brain is sending a message to the arm to swing, but the arm's not getting that message. But the brain thinks the message is going through. So for me, I was at work, and it was on a Monday after a holiday, after a weekend, and I was walking from my office to a back part of the facility with an employee. And as we were walking, my employee said, "Hey, did you hurt your arm over the weekend?" And I said, "No, why?" She goes, "Well, because your arm's not swinging when you walk, and it's kind of looks weird." I'm like, "Wait, no, what are you talking about?" And I looked, and sure enough, my left arm was not swinging when I walked. By the way, the Parkinson's impacts my left side. My left arm didn't swing when I walked. My left hand tremors. Another way that bradykinesia manifests itself is shuffling of the feet, or when you don't lift your feet as high as you should, and you scuff your foot on the ground. I was doing that seriously, is in a major way, when my Parkinson's was coming on. And I was actually tripping over a lot of things because my brain was thinking my foot was higher than it was, and it wasn't. I was tripping over stuff, or when I was just regularly walking, I thought that I was raising my foot to step forward, but my left foot, I thought it was raising to step forward, but it was often drag on the ground. So that's what's called bradykinesia. Okay, so doctors look for three things. They look for bradykinesia and a tremor, resting tremor, or rigidity, or a combination of those, and possibly postural instability. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So when we talk about Parkinson's, I'm going to throw some statistics out there for you, because Parkinson's was classified by the CDC recently as the fastest growing neurological condition in the world. Fastest growing neurologic condition in the world. Faster than Alzheimer's, faster than strokes or other neurological conditions. So the fastest growing neurological condition in the world. That is insane. That's noteworthy, right? Well, currently there's about 10 million people worldwide with Parkinson's. And in the United States, there's about 1.1 million people in the United States with Parkinson's. Every year, about 90,000 people in the United States get diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. But the forecast is even more scary. The forecast is going to tell us that in the next 25 years, by 2050, there will be an estimated 25 million people with Parkinson's worldwide. Currently, there's 10 million. They say in another 25 years, that will more than double to 25 million. So the rate at which Parkinson's is growing is incredible. And that's a significant issue, obviously, because the likelihood that you or somebody around you will get Parkinson's is greater. And it's growing exponentially. So when we talk about the need for research and for funding and for a cure and for a diagnosis, this is what we talk about. It's so critical because it literally is a critical thing. Okay, so I talked about the environmental factors with Parkinson's, right? So we have environmental reasons why Parkinson's is around. Again, we talked about paraquat. Also, I saw a statistic about the soldiers at Camp Lejeune. Soldiers that served on Camp Lejeune have like a 70% higher rate of Parkinson's than the average soldier. And there's some talk about the water in Camp Lejeune. Maybe that's what it was from. I don't know, but That's something just significant. So as you read in the news about different things coming up and impacts from different chemicals, take note of those things and look and see if Parkinson's is one of the things that they see is impacted by that. Okay, so talking about water, many of you know that I grew up in San Diego, and of course I was in the ocean quite a bit growing up. And because I was in the ocean a lot of people I know, they had an addiction to the water. They just would love to get in the water. But there's a rare condition in San Diego where people get addicted to seaweed. And so if people are addicted to seaweed, what do you do? Because if you're addicted to seaweed, I mean, what do you do to help yourself? Well, if you're addicted to seaweed, you seek help. So you seek help. So, stuff. There you go. Okay, guys. So Parkinson's disease, again, affecting 10 million people worldwide, 1.1 million people in the United States. Just a huge thing. So if you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, what can you do? Well, when you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, or let me back up, when you're diagnosed with any chronic illness or any significant diagnosis, it's like you get punched in the gut. There's just this moment where the doctor might continue to talk, but you don't hear anything. It's like Charlie Brown's teacher. It's like wah 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 wah, and you don't hear anything. You don't, because you're still back on that sentence that said you have Parkinson's disease, and they're talking about more stuff, right? But if you're diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, oftentimes people are left with a lot of questions. They might be given a bottle of levodopa, told to take these 3 times a day for the next month, and come back in a month or two, and we'll follow up. And they're not given a lot of direction. Okay, so if you have been diagnosed with Parkinson's, or somebody that you know or love has been diagnosed with Parkinson's, that diagnosis period is very difficult. There's a grieving process that you go through. And again, that's not just with Parkinson's. That's any chronic or significant diagnosis. But today's show is about Parkinson's, so I'll keep it there. So you have to understand a couple things. Number one, let the person grieve. If it's you, let yourself grieve. Let yourself grieve the fact that you now have a medical condition that is going to impact you the rest of your life, unless, again, there's a miracle or there's a cure produced in our lifetime, which, by the way, I have a tattoo on my arm. It's the International Parkinson symbol, and below it is the diagnosis date, and below that I'm leaving space open for my cure date, because I'm an optimist and I believe that in my lifetime I will see a cure for Parkinson's, okay? But right now, there's not a cure, right? So with that, if you've been diagnosed with Parkinson's, my number one thing, like I said, let yourself grieve. If it's somebody else, let them grieve. Let them go through what they're going through. If you're a supporter, if you're a loved one of somebody with Parkinson's that was diagnosed with Parkinson's, come alongside them, support them, let them do their thing, let them talk about it. Let them talk about it all they want. Even if they have to talk about it a lot, let them do it. It's such a huge deal, and you're doing them a favor by allowing them to talk about it and just to listen to them. Number two, seek help. And by that, I'm not talking about the seaweed. Seek help. There's lots of resources with the Parkinson's Foundation. And as some of you know, I am a volunteer for the Parkinson's Foundation. But there's a lot of good organizations out there that have a lot of good information. The Michael J. Fox Foundation, Davis Finney Foundation, just to name a couple. ADPA. There's a lot of good organizations out there that have it. But the Parkinson's Foundation has a resource that no one else has to this level. They have a hotline that you can call, and that hotline is fantastic. I know people that have called that hotline for any one of a number of questions about Parkinson's or Parkinson's support, and they've been able to help. From, hey, where's a support group in my area? where's some information on diet and nutrition, what's the exercise I should do, all that stuff. The hotline can answer those questions, and the Parkinson's Foundation website has a boatload of information as well. So I refer people there, which, by the way, one of the things they have is a newly diagnosed information kit packet. So if you're newly diagnosed, I would recommend that you get those resources from the Parkinson's Foundation or give them a call at their hotline. I'll put the number on the screen here. Call the Parkinson's Foundation hotline and talk to them and get some questions answered. The other thing I would say is get connected with some people. Parkinson's disease tends to want to make people isolate. I'm a very extroverted person, okay? And I really do like to be around people, and I like to be in groups and things like that. But Parkinson's, even myself, that's a very extroverted person, makes me want to draw back and stay by myself. And that's a bad thing. When you have Parkinson's, you really do need to find a way to get yourself plugged into people that will support you, that will love you, that will come along for the ride. And by the way, I have an episode coming up where I'm gonna talk about this, and I think it's gonna be a very fun episode where I'm gonna talk about some people that came along for the ride with me, which is a great thing. Okay, but get yourself plugged into a support group, a community of people that can support you and help you and answer your questions. That is critical. There's a very good online Parkinson's community on Instagram and on TikTok. You can find people there, but also, like I said, get in a structured. This is my opinion. This is not medical advice. This is my opinion. But I would say get yourself involved in a structured support group too, even if it's online or if it's local, that kind of thing. So just be aware of that, okay? Also, I wanted to talk about the term young onset Parkinson's and early onset Parkinson's. What's the difference? There is no difference, okay? You'll hear those terms used interchangeably, and they are interchangeable. So young onset Parkinson's or early onset Parkinson's is Parkinson's that comes at the onset of Parkinson's by the time the person is 50 or below in age. So at the age of 50 or below is when their Parkinson's started. I was actually diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's because I was diagnosed at the age of 54, but going back in time with my neurologist, there were symptoms that happened that appeared 5 years prior that I didn't recognize as Parkinson's symptoms. I had a situation called micro-writing, where my writing became microscopic and uncontrollably microscopic. I couldn't help it. That's a symptom of Parkinson's. Also, when I was typing, I used to be a very fast typer because I was in the pharmaceutical industry for 23 years, send a lot of emails, do a lot of stuff. And I was pretty good at typing. But my ability to type effectively slowed considerably because my left hand could not keep up with my right hand. So that's another instance of bradykinesia. My left hand slowed its movement and could not keep up with the right. So I was mistyping stuff all the time. And to this day, I still struggle with that. I actually use dictation software quite a bit at work or even at home when I'm generating a email that's lengthy or a document that needs a lot of typing. I'll oftentimes use a dictation software. So anyway, what have we covered today? We've covered what Parkinson's is. We've covered what Parkinson's isn't. We've covered the diagnosis of Parkinson's and what young onset Parkinson's is as well. And we also talked about what you do for Parkinson's from the perspective of medication. Now, I could go on and on about Parkinson's. You could talk about later stages, or I could talk about things that happen with people as they progress, like deep brain stimulation, things like that. Not this episode. There'll be more episodes talking about those things. So for today, I'm going to keep it at that. If you have any questions or comments, please hit me up and let me know, because Parkinson's disease is so sorely misunderstood. It really is. I mean, I was a caregiver for somebody with Parkinson's. My grandmother had Parkinson's, and my family took care of my grandmother for about a year and a half when she had Parkinson's and also dementia. And even having been a caretaker or caregiver for somebody with Parkinson's, I still didn't understand Parkinson's really until I got Parkinson's and started doing more research. And it's a very misunderstood condition. And the reason for that is there's some like 60 symptoms of Parkinson's And a lot of them are non-movement symptoms. They're like for me, most of my Parkinson's symptoms are non-movement. My left hand does tremor when my medication is low, but beyond that, most of my worst symptoms are not visible by the naked eye. I get bad bouts of depression, apathy, which is weird because if you don't care about anything, how can you be depressed, right? But it is true. Apathy and depression, they go together with Parkinson's. Anxiety and panic attacks, huge. Insomnia, huge. So there's just a bunch of things that that Parkinson's affects that people just don't understand. I also have peripheral neuropathy. I've got neuropathy in both my feet as a result of Parkinson. So there's other things that go along with Parkinson's, which throughout the course of this podcast we'll talk more at length. But that's a good general overview for today of Parkinson's and what it is and what it's not. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know. Hit me up. My email is going to be in the show notes. You can hit me up at markintheparkpodcast@gmail.com. That's markintheparkpodcast@gmail.com. And just, let me know if you got some questions. Or like I said, call the Parkinson's Foundation hotline and they will get you some resources or answer the questions. They're fantastic. So with that, guys, I'm going to get to the part of the show that I call Get to the Chopper. Get to the chopper.
Get to the chopper.
And as I talk about looking back on the end of the show, Get to the Chopper, by the way, for those that haven't listened before, Get to the Chopper means we're getting to the end of the show, that we're at that part of the show where, like at the end of the movie, the helicopters are coming for extraction. They're going to take away, they're going to fly everybody back to their normal lives, and the movie's over. And so this is where I look back on the episode and say the one thing that I want to reiterate, one thing that I want to point out for my listeners. It's like that opportunity to underscore something from the podcast today. And the point I want to underscore today is, if you have been newly diagnosed with Parkinson's, do not stay alone. Get yourself connected, get resources, get a newly diagnosed kit from the Parkinson's Foundation, get involved with a support group, but get connected. Do not stay isolated. Trust me, you will appreciate that. Find some people that will support you. Even, and this is a sad thing to say, but oftentimes your own family, may not support you the way you would like. Your own family and some of your closest friends may not support you the way you would have thought in a condition like this or in a situation like this. That happens. That's what I'm saying. And again, this is not particular to Parkinson's. If you have a chronic illness diagnosis or a serious diagnosis, oftentimes people that you thought would be standing right by you, they do fade away. But when it happens, other people rise up and they are that support for you. So get yourself plugged in and find yourself people to help you, to help support you in your newly diagnosed condition. So there we go. Okay, guys. Well, with that, I'm going to call this episode done. Next week, I've got a very exciting episode for you, and coming soon, I'm going to have an episode. Like I said, I'm going to do an episode with some of those people that came along for the ride. I think it's going to be a very fun episode. And then I also have a very wonderful guest coming from Ireland. And some of you may know her from TikTok, and I'm going to put a teaser out there right now. In the next episode, I'm going to divulge who this is. But if you guys are on TikTok in the Parkinson's community, you'll know who I'm talking about. But I'm going to throw that teaser out there right now. And guys, there's just some great episodes coming up. So make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, and tell people about the podcast, because, guys, it's growing. We're now in 8 different countries, guys. We're now in 8 different countries, and the listenership is growing. So please continue to spread the word, get it out there. We're hoping that this podcast serves some good and help some people with not just understanding about Parkinson's, but about life in general, or how to deal with adversity and things like that. And that's what I really want this podcast to be about. So thanks, guys, for listening. We really appreciate it. And until next time, guys, keep your head up and guys, keep exploring. That's what life's about. Life's a journey. We got to enjoy the journey as well as the destination. So keep exploring. Talk to you soon, guys. Take care. God bless. Thanks for joining me on this edition of Mark in the Park, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review. Your support helps more people discover the show. For show notes, updates, and future episodes, or to connect, head over to markinthepark21.com. Got a guest idea or a topic suggestion? Drop me a line at markintheparkpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And to all my listeners, this is Mark Milow reminding you, life is as much about the journey as the destination. So enjoy the sights and sounds along the way. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep exploring.